My name is Olivia Grant, and on the day I buried my father, I found out he might not have been mine to begin with. Right there in front of the casket, my stepmother handed me adoption papers and told me I didn't deserve a penny. But if they thought they could erase me with lies, they don't know who they're dealing with. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to know how far this story travels. It started with the smell of lilies, too many of them, stuffed into vases around the church parlor like they could drown out the stench of grief. I stood frozen beside the mahogany casket, my hands folded tight in front of me, like if I let go, I'd crumble right there on the plush maroon carpet. He looked peaceful, almost like he could still reach out, tousle my hair, and call me his baby girl the way he always did. But there was something else in the air, too. A tension that curled at the back of my neck. Whispers from the pews, too quiet to catch, but loud enough to sting. I turned and caught the smirk on my half-sister Jenna's lips. She adjusted her designer sunglasses like we were posing for a magazine spread, not mourning a man who raised us. Then Linda stepped forward. My stepmother. The woman who married my dad when I was 10 and made it her life's work to remind me I wasn't hers. She didn't cry, not even pretend. She leaned in close, her perfume thick with something powdery and fake, and hissed, "You might want to sit down for this." Then she dropped a manila envelope into my hands like it was an offering, only the kind that came with a curse. "I didn't want to do this here," she said, though her smile betrayed her. "But since you're already playing the grieving daughter," my fingers trembled as I pulled out the papers. Legal documents. My name, my father's, and a word that cleaved through me like a blade. Adopted. No, 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 no. Before I could even process it, Mr. Greaves, our family lawyer, stepped up to the podium. His voice was dry, clinical. "The estate, as per the most recent documentation and legal filing, passes solely to the biological children, Jenna and Mark." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. I barely heard them. My ears roared, my eyes blurred. "But that can't be right," I whispered. I wasn't even sure who I was talking to. Maybe God. Maybe my father. Greaves didn't flinch. "The adoption records were submitted by Mrs. Grant. Everything appears legitimate." Linda beamed, the victor at a funeral. "Looks like Daddy had secrets," she whispered, patting my shoulder. "Sorry, sweetheart. Guess that Corvette's not yours after all." Mark, my smug half-brother, laughed out loud, not even trying to hide it. "I call the beach house," Jenna said. I stood there, holding the death certificate of my identity while they divvied up the spoils. No one spoke for me. No one questioned it. Not one mourner came to ask if I was okay. They just moved on like I never belonged. My father's casket closed with a thud that echoed straight into my spine. As the pallbearers carried him out, I felt the ground sway beneath me. Not because of grief I could have handled, but betrayal. Betrayal has a different weight. I looked down at the papers again. Neat, legalistic font. Stamped. Signed. But something about them itched at my skin, like a lie dressed in truth's clothing. He called me his baby girl. Every birthday, every bedtime story, every dance recital. Had that all been a performance? Or was someone else lying now, hoping I'd be too broken to ask the right questions? Linda leaned in again, voice like poison wrapped in lace. "You should have stayed quiet, Olivia. You were never part of this family to begin with." I said nothing. Not yet. But in that moment, surrounded by whispers, mockery, and the scent of funeral flowers, I made a silent vow. If she thought this was over, she'd just started a war. Back in my apartment, I didn't even turn the lights on. I dropped the envelope on the coffee table like it was radioactive and collapsed onto the floor beside it, knees pulled to my chest. The church clothes clung to me, black polyester that still reeked of roses and betrayal. The lamp on my desk flickered when I finally switched it on. Warm, dim light spilled across the carpet and the cream envelope. My name was printed on it in harsh black ink, like it had been waiting for this moment longer than I had. I pulled the papers out again. Adoption certificate, notarized signatures, a court seal that looked official, maybe too official. The silence in my apartment was thick, except for the occasional creak of the building settling, like even it knew something was off. He called me his baby girl, over and over. When I won spelling bees. When I scraped my knee in 3rd grade. When I lost my first tooth and refused to smile without my hand over my mouth. Dad had always been there. Hadn't he? I muttered, "There must be a mistake," for the fourth time, as if repetition would rewrite the past. I traced the name of the judge on the document with my fingertip. The date, September 16th, 1994. I was 2 years old. Did I remember anything from before that? Nothing clear. Just flashes, a red blanket, the scent of cedarwood, a song about starlight. Not enough to ground anything real. A knock at the door startled me. Jessica, thank God. She stepped in holding 2 coffees, took one look at me still sitting on the floor, and wordlessly sank down beside me. Jessica had been my best friend since college. She was the one who helped me move in here, the one who cried with me when my dad got sick. She handed me a cup. Still warm. Barely. I nodded, my hands shaking slightly as I gripped the lid. Her eyes fell on the papers. "You gonna tell me what that witch said to you at the funeral?" I swallowed hard. "She said I'm not his daughter. Legally, she had these. She gave them to me in front of everyone, said I wasn't getting a dime." Jessica's eyes widened, but she didn't speak right away. She just picked up one of the pages and stared at it like she was trying to burn holes through it. "I mean, we always knew she hated you," she said finally. "But this is a whole new level of evil. It's not even about the money," I said quietly. "It's about everything, my dad, who I am. I don't know what to believe." Jessica reached out, touched my shoulder gently. "Do you think the papers are real?" I looked at her, feeling the question burrow into my gut. "I don't know, that's the worst part. I keep replaying things. Was he keeping a secret? Or is she just trying to erase me because she thinks no one will fight back?" Jessica leaned back against the couch. "You remember your dad's voice, right? His words, his face when he looked at you." I nodded slowly. "He never looked at you like you were anything less than his kid." Tears sprang up suddenly. "So why did no one speak up, not even Greaves? He acted like I was just nothing." Jessica's jaw clenched. "Maybe he's in on it, or maybe he's scared of her. Either way, I need to know the truth," I cut in. "Whatever it is." Jessica met my eyes, serious now. "And we start digging." She pulled her laptop out of her bag and opened a new tab. "Let's go over the documents piece by piece, see where they were filed, who signed them, what address they list." I handed her the certificate. "There's a home address on there, something called Hope Haven Home." Jessica typed it in. A pause, then her brow furrowed. "Nothing recent comes up," she said. "But there's an archived listing, some kind of orphanage on the outskirts of Atlanta, shut down years ago." My stomach dropped. "I don't remember ever being in an orphanage." Jessica looked at me. "What if that's because you weren't?" We sat in silence for a few seconds. Then she reached for my hand. "Liv, we're going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it takes." And somehow, in that moment, her voice was the first thing that made me feel real again. Like maybe I wasn't invisible. Like maybe the world hadn't rewritten who I was while I stood in mourning. But one thing was clear. The answers weren't going to come from memories alone. We needed to go to that address. To the orphanage, or what was left of it. Only then would I know if my entire life had been built on a lie. 3 days later, I turned off the main road and onto a gravel path that crunched like bones beneath the tires. Jessica sat in the passenger seat, holding the printed map from the archives like it was a compass to my past. Trees closed in on both sides, their branches gnarled and bare. Even the sun seemed hesitant to follow us here. "Are you sure this is it?" she asked, leaning forward. "That's what the adoption form says," I replied, my hands tight on the steering wheel. "Hope Haven Home, 1186 Pineshore Road." We rounded a bend and came to a slow stop. This was it, or what was left of it. Before us stood a charred skeleton of a building, sagging inward, the roof collapsed in patches like missing teeth. Vines clawed up the sides of the stone foundation, and graffiti covered what remained of the brick walls. In huge, faded spray paint across the front, "Hope Haven equals Hell Haven." My stomach twisted. We got out of the car slowly, the wind biting even though it was supposed to be spring. The gate was rusted open, creaking with every gust. Beyond it, concrete steps led to a doorway with no door, just blackened hinges and ashes. Jessica's voice was low. "It burned." "Yeah," I whispered. "And it looks like no one rebuilt." We stepped through the threshold. The air smelled like soot even after all these years. The floor crunched underfoot, glass, charred wood, scattered debris. I scanned the remnants of the entryway. Bits of tile still clung to the floor. A busted metal filing cabinet lay on its side, drawers melted shut. This place once held children, cribs, Laughter, crying. Had I been here? Had I slept here even for a night? Jessica turned in a slow circle. There's nothing here. I crouched beside a wall where part of a bulletin board still clung, paper scraps burned around the edges. One fragment had the outline of a teddy bear on it. For a second, the silence pressed in so tight I could hear my own heart. What if she was telling the truth? I said quietly. Jessica looked over. Liv, what if I was adopted? What if I just blocked this place out? If I was 2 years old, I wouldn't remember. She shook her head, walking over. And what if this place was used to make the story sound real? If someone needed an address that no longer existed? I didn't answer, because both things were possible, and that was the problem. I stood up and looked through what used to be a window. There was no glass, just jagged edges. Beyond the frame, trees rustled, indifferent to the wreckage. This was supposed to tell me something, I said, voice breaking. I thought maybe I'd walk in and feel it, some memory, a flash, anything. Jessica placed a hand on my arm. The truth doesn't always scream, sometimes it hides, but we'll find it. I nodded, blinking back the sting in my eyes. We spent another half-hour walking the perimeter. Most of the files had been destroyed in the fire, if they were ever here at all. No names, no records, just destruction. As we left, I turned back one last time. The spray-painted words loomed again. Hope Haven equals Hell Haven, and I couldn't help but wonder, had that been a cry from someone who lived here? Or a warning to someone like me? The engine growled as I pulled into the circular driveway of my father's estate, a place I had called home for 17 years, and now wasn't mine. Jessica stayed in the car. She offered to come, but I shook my head. I'll be quick, I said. I just need to grab a few things before she throws them out. The truth, I wasn't sure what I'd find inside, or what I even wanted. But something in me needed to walk through that house again, not as a daughter, but as a witness. The door opened before I even rang the bell. Linda stood there in black slacks and a silk blouse, sipping from a wine glass at 2 in the afternoon. Her hair was pulled back tight, her lips curled in a mock smile. Well, look what the cat dragged back. I came to pick up a few of my things, I said, voice steady. You have 5 minutes, she said, stepping aside. Touch anything that doesn't belong to you, and I'll call the police. As I walked in, the scent of the house hit me. Mahogany, fireplace ash, the faintest trace of Dad's aftershave. I clenched my jaw. Every room felt like a ghost of a memory that had been locked away and rearranged without consent. Linda hovered like a warden. Living room, hall, closet, that's it. I ignored her. The house was quieter than I remembered. Too quiet. The warmth was gone. The framed photos had been replaced. Portraits of Jenna and Mark now dominated the mantel. Not a single picture of me in sight. I ducked into the hallway, knelt by the coat closet, and pulled out the box I had packed before the funeral. Journals, a necklace, a few letters my dad had written me in college. As I lifted the lid, my elbow knocked into a bookshelf beside the door. A soft thump echoed behind me. I turned. A leather-bound photo album had fallen to the floor, one I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't Linda's. I recognized the ribbon tied around it immediately. My grandmother, Aliner's, Dad's mother. She'd passed when I was a teenager, but she used to sit with me in this very room, flipping through this same album and telling me stories from the black and white pages. I hesitated. 2 minutes, Linda barked from the kitchen. I ignored her and opened the album, sitting cross-legged right there on the carpet. The first few pages were familiar, sepia-toned snapshots of a 1950s picnic, a wedding, my father as a boy, beaming on a tricycle. Then I turned a page and froze. A photo of Grandma Aliner at the beach. She stood beside an umbrella, smiling with her hand on her hip, wearing a retro swimsuit. And on her left shoulder, clear as day, a birthmark. A small, dark crescent, just like mine. I touched my own shoulder through my coat. I'd always had that mark. People said it looked like a comma. Dad used to say, even your grandmother had that same little moon, family signature. I stared back at the photo, my throat tightened. Olivia, Linda's voice called again, sharper this time. Time's up. I closed the album carefully and slid it into my bag. I didn't say goodbye, didn't slam the door or make a scene. I just walked out calm, collected, and holding something I hadn't had in days. Hope. Jessica looked up from her phone as I climbed into the car. Everything okay? No, I said. But I found something. She raised a brow as I showed her the photo. She leaned in, examining the birthmark. "That's your shoulder." "It was hers first," I said softly. "And if I have her mark, then I have her blood, which means—" "Your father was your father," Jessica finished for me. We sat in stunned silence for a beat. The pieces weren't just falling into place, they were beginning to push back. Linda might have had forged papers, but I had a grandmother's photo, a literal mark of bloodline. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt the gears shift. This wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning, I walked into the clean, quiet office of Mr. Deeks, the kind of place where the air smelled like printer ink and careful judgment. He stood when I entered, an older man with silver hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of posture that said he'd spent decades peering over fine details and catching what others missed. "You must be Olivia Grant," he said, offering a firm handshake. "I heard you've got a curious case." "That's one word for it," I said, managing a faint smile. I handed him the envelope containing the adoption documents, the same ones Linda had so proudly weaponized at the funeral. He sat at his desk, pulled on a pair of rimless glasses, and began reading silently, eyes narrowing just slightly. I tried not to fidget. I didn't want to seem desperate, but my hands refused to unclench in my lap. Mr. Deeks flipped the last page, then held it up to the light. He made a small noise, almost a scoff. "What is it?" I asked. He motioned for me to come closer. I stood at his side, watching as he angled the paper to catch the sunlight filtering through his window. "See the notary stamp here?" he asked. I nodded. "Notice how the embossing doesn't quite align with the ink seal," he continued. "That's the first red flag. Most legal stamps depress the paper and leave a raised edge. This one's printed flat." My heart rate kicked up. "Meaning," he lowered the page, "meaning it's a simulation, a visual copy, high quality but fake." I blinked. "You're saying this document was forged," he said, tapping the corner of the page. "Professionally, yes, but not perfectly. Someone used template software, likely patched elements from real records." I stared down at the page I'd clutched for days, the lie I'd nearly believed. "And this signature," he added, pointing to the judge's name. "I've reviewed Judge Mayers's authentic filings. This doesn't match his handwriting, not even close." It hit me like a tidal wave, cold, furious validation. "So she lied," I said quietly. Mr. Deeks folded his hands. "Yes, and she went to great lengths to do it. Whoever made these wanted them to stand up to casual scrutiny, but not expert eyes." I sank into the chair across from him. "And you're sure?" I asked, needing to hear it one more time. "As sure as I am breathing," he said with finality. "I'll draft a full report for you with comparative samples and analysis. Should be ready in a few days." Relief crashed into me. So sudden it almost felt like grief. All this time I'd been doubting myself, unraveling memories, questioning my own identity, and here, in black and white, was proof that I had been right to fight. I wasn't an outsider. I was a daughter. "I can't thank you enough," I said, rising to shake his hand again. Mr. Deeks gave me a faint smile. "Your stepmother may be clever, but not clever enough." As I left his office, sunlight hit my face in a way that felt different, warmer, like I was finally walking into my truth instead of away from it. Jessica was waiting outside, perched on the hood of my car with 2 iced coffees in hand. I raised mine toward her like a toast. "They're fake." Her face lit up. "You're serious?" Deeks confirmed it, forged seals, wrong handwriting, the works. She let out a low whistle. Well, Linda's mask just slipped. "And now," I said, climbing into the car, "we take this to someone who can actually do something about it." Jessica raised a brow. "You thinking cops?" I nodded. "Atlanta PD, time to make this official." We pulled into traffic, the city buzzing around us, but inside the car it was quiet, focused. Something had shifted. We weren't searching for truth anymore. We had it. Now we were coming for justice. The Atlanta Police Department was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in tone. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a pale blue wash that made even good intentions look clinical. Detective Marla Brooks met us in interview room 3. Mid-40s, crisp navy suit, hair pulled back, not a hint of warmth in her voice. "I read your email," she said, flipping open a slim folder. "You're claiming forged adoption papers led to you being disinherited." I nodded. "The family attorney accepted them at face value. They were used to legally cut me out, but they're fake. I had them examined by a document expert, Mr. Deeks. He's known statewide. She lifted one brow. You understand this is a civil matter, not a criminal one, unless fraud can be clearly proven. I slid the envelope across the table. This isn't just suspicion. This is evidence. She unfolded Deeks's report, lips pursed. Jessica sat beside me, silent but solid, her phone already recording audio just in case. Brooks read slowly, meticulously, then she looked back up. Mr. Deeks states the notary seal is printed, not embossed, and the signature doesn't match court archives. I nodded again. The orphanage listed on the paperwork, burned down years ago, no public records available. It's a dead end, perfect for faking a trail. Brooks leaned back in her chair. You have any idea how often we see family fights over wills? This isn't a fight, I said tightly. It's fraud. My stepmother forged legal documents to make it look like I wasn't my father's daughter. She presented them at his funeral in front of the lawyer, in front of the entire family, and used them to take everything. And you believe your father was unaware of this supposed adoption? He raised me, called me his daughter, never once said I wasn't. She paused. DNA test. I hesitated. I never thought to do one, but I found a photo of my grandmother. She had the same birthmark I do. Same placement, same shape. I believe that proves biological connection. Brooks made a small note. Circumstantial, but worth mentioning. Her tone was unreadable, flat, methodical. I leaned in. If she faked those documents, what else did she hide? What else did she bury? For the first time, Brooks's expression flickered. Then she stood, gathering the folder. I'll open a case file. This will take time, document authentication, legal context, any supporting evidence. I nodded. Thank you. As we stood to leave, she added, but Olivia, be prepared. If your stepmother's smart enough to forge a legal paper trail, she may have covered more tracks than you realize. I looked her straight in the eyes. Then she'll need to run faster because I'm not stopping. Outside, the air felt sharp. Jessica let out a low breath. She was skeptical. She should be, I replied. That's her job. But she didn't shut it down. No, she didn't, Jessica agreed. And now it's on the record. We started walking back to the car when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello, a woman's voice, rough, urgent. Is this Olivia Grant? Yes, who is this? This is Karen Dobbins. I used to work at Hope Haven before the fire. I stopped in my tracks. Jessica turned toward me, instantly alert. Sorry, what? I said. I saw your inquiry online. I worked records at the home. I've been trying to forget that place for years, but I recognize your name. My breath caught. Did you know me back then? There was a pause, then carefully, no, I never saw a child by your name in our files. What does that mean? I don't know yet, but if your name was used in paperwork connected to Hope Haven, it wasn't placed there honestly. The wind picked up, fluttering loose hair across my face. Karen's voice lowered. I kept copies of certain files. Ones that didn't feel right. I can meet you if you want to see for yourself. Where? Downtown Library, Tuesday, East Wing, 3rd floor. 1 p.m., then she hung up. Jessica stared at me. Who was that? Someone who worked at the orphanage, I said slowly. And she just confirmed what we already suspected. I looked down at the phone in my hand, still buzzing faintly from the call that had ended. Hope Haven hadn't just gone up in flames. It had burned with secrets still inside. The week crawled like a wounded animal. I counted hours, replayed memories, reread Deeks's report until the edges grew soft and curled from handling. Every moment that passed stretched tighter around my chest, like some invisible string ready to snap. Then finally, on Thursday morning, my phone rang. Ms. Grant! Mr. Deeks's voice was calm, precise. Your official forensic analysis is complete. You can come pick it up anytime. I was there within the hour. He handed me a sealed envelope across his desk. Thick, heavy, more than just words inside. This was proof. I clutched it with both hands like it might fly away if I blinked. I included detailed comparison scans of authentic court documents versus the forgeries, he said. Also noted, the suspicious timing of the filing, the use of outdated county templates, and multiple digital inconsistencies. I met his eyes. You think this will hold up? In any courtroom worth its salt, he said. You're not just dealing with bad paperwork. This is criminal fraud. I left with the envelope pressed to my chest as if it were the only thing anchoring me to truth, because in a way it was. Back at my apartment, Jessica and I spread everything across the table: photos, the report, my grandmother's album. Each piece was a thread in the tapestry of the lie that Linda had spun. "We take this back to Detective Brooks," I said. "Today." Jessica nodded. "You're ready." But ready didn't mean calm. By the time we arrived at the station, my hands had gone cold. My voice was steady, but only just. Brooks met us in the same gray interview room. This time her posture had shifted, less skeptical, more focused. I slid the report across the table. "This is the full forensic analysis," I said. "Mr. Deek signed and notarized it. He's willing to testify." She flipped the first page. Her brows lifted slightly as she scanned the evidence. "Multiple digital mismatches, signature inconsistency, template sourcing traced to public editing software." Her eyes flicked up to me. "Your stepmother's sloppy." "No," I said quietly. "She's arrogant. She thought no one would challenge her." Brooks closed the folder. "Well," she said, standing, "she's going to be very surprised." It moved quickly after that. Within 2 days, the department called me back with news. Linda's lawyer, Mr. Kelman, had been arrested for obstruction of justice. According to Detective Brooks, he'd been in possession of a second version of my father's will, a copy that never saw the light of day. He had hidden it, buried it, literally. "When we served the warrant on his office," Brooks told me over the phone, "we found the document in a sealed envelope behind a drawer taped under the desk, dated 3 months before your father died." "And what did it say?" I asked, breath caught in my chest. Brooks didn't make me wait. "It names you as the sole beneficiary, Olivia. He left everything to you." For a moment, the world went completely still. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just sat in silence, letting the words settle like dust after an explosion. Jessica was across the room, watching my face carefully. "What is it?" she asked. I looked up at her, dazed. "He left it all to me." She didn't speak, just walked over and hugged me. It wasn't about the money, not the house, not the cars. It was the validation. The knowing he hadn't betrayed me, he hadn't lied. They did. They twisted the truth and shoved it into the fire, hoping no one would reach in after it. But I had. Later that evening, Brooks met with me in person. She carried a thin file and a look I hadn't seen before, something close to respect. "We've opened a formal case," she said. "Kelman is cooperating. And with Deeks's report and the suppressed will, we have enough to pursue charges against your stepmother: fraud, document falsification, perjury, and obstruction." I nodded, absorbing every syllable. "She won't get away with this." Brooks closed the file. "No, she won't." I exhaled slowly. For the first time since the funeral, my breath didn't catch halfway up my throat. It was happening, the unraveling, the reckoning. I wasn't just reclaiming what had been stolen. I was exposing what had been hidden, dragging it into the light where it could never bury itself again. It was strange how fast things moved after that. One day, I was knocking on doors for answers. The next, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Lawyers, press inquiries, subpoenas, all orbiting around a will that had been hidden in darkness for nearly a year. And just like that, the lie unraveled in daylight. Detective Brooks called early Tuesday morning. I was standing in my kitchen, still in pajamas, stirring coffee with a spoon I'd forgotten to wash. "Olivia," she said without preamble, "Kelman has turned everything over, and he's confessed under oath." I leaned against the counter. "Confessed to what exactly?" "To burying your father's real will at Linda's request." Her voice was low, controlled. "She told him you were adopted, that your father was planning to disinherit you. But when the actual will came in, leaving everything to you, she panicked. Paid him to hide it, said she'd take care of the paperwork on her end." I didn't speak, couldn't for a second. "Olivia," Brooks asked. "I'm here," I said, my voice cracking. I just needed to hear that. It was confirmation not just of the crime, but of the intent, the venom. Linda hadn't just pushed me out by accident. She'd drawn the line and shoved me over it. Brooks continued, "The prosecutor's office is moving forward, but I have to warn you, Linda's not going quietly. She's already filed motions, denials, she's lawyering up hard." "Let her," I said. "I've got the truth." That Friday, I stood at the courthouse steps watching the wind whip through the city square. Jessica parked nearby and joined me, coat fluttering around her ankles, a coffee in each hand. She handed me one without a word. Court's not even in session yet, I said, trying to smile. She sipped her coffee. You wanted to see them arrive, didn't you? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Minutes passed. Then they showed up. Linda, in a pale gray suit that screamed wealth and innocence, walked up the steps flanked by her 2 children. Jenna looked smug. Mark wore dark sunglasses like he thought this was a red carpet event. They laughed, right there on the courthouse steps. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. Their posturing was louder than any words. They still think they're going to win, Jessica muttered beside me. No, I said, watching Linda's heels click sharply against the concrete. She thinks I'll break before this ends. Linda turned. For a brief second, our eyes locked, and I didn't look away. She was the one who flinched. Inside the courtroom, the energy shifted. The judge entered, and suddenly all the power games and preening fell silent under the weight of the gavel. My lawyer, Ms. Leighton, leaned over as we took our seats. Linda's attorneys will try to argue that the will was forged. Even with the confession, they're going to discredit anything they can. They can try, I said, sliding my grandmother's photo album into my lap. I kept it there like a talisman, not just for comfort, but for memory. I'd brought truth into this room. Tangible, documented, validated truth. Now we'd see if the law could do what love and legacy hadn't yet managed, hold her accountable. When the first evidence was introduced, I watched Linda carefully. She didn't blink as the fake adoption certificate was projected on a large screen. Didn't flinch when Mr. Deeks testified, walking the court through each forged element with surgical precision. Didn't react when Detective Brooks took the stand to confirm that Kelman's confession had been obtained legally and backed by hard proof. But her fingers twitched. That's when I knew. She wasn't as calm as she wanted the court to believe. We recessed for the day before my testimony. The hallway outside was buzzing, lawyers murmuring, clerks filing, reporters pretending not to hover. I stood by the window trying to slow my breathing. Jessica joined me. You okay? I nodded slowly. I just didn't think seeing her again would feel like this. Like what? Like I'm finally taller than her shadow. Jessica smiled. That's because you are. They called my name just after lunch. I walked to the witness stand like I was walking a tightrope. Each step deliberate, my hands cold, the weight of everything pressing down on my shoulders. The courtroom hushed. The judge looked at me kindly, asked me to raise my right hand, and I swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I took my seat and folded my hands tightly in my lap. State your name, please, my attorney prompted. Olivia Grace Grant, and your relationship to the late Charles Grant. I looked out across the room. He was my father, the only one I've ever known. There was a pause, just long enough for the meaning to settle. Ms. Leighton nodded. Tell us about the last few days of his life. I swallowed. He was sick. We talked every night. He made me promise I'd keep writing, said he was proud of me. He didn't talk about the will. I didn't ask. I didn't think I needed to. And when did you first hear about this supposed adoption? At his funeral. My stepmother, Linda, handed me forged documents and said I wasn't his daughter, that I shouldn't expect a dime. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Ms. Leighton held up the forensic report. And when you had these documents analyzed, they were proven to be fakes. The stamp was printed, the judge's signature was falsified. None of it was real. And what did you find that confirmed your biological connection? I reached down and held up the photo album. I opened it to the page with my grandmother's beach picture. This, I said, showing the photo to the courtroom. That's my grandmother. She has the same birthmark I do on the same shoulder. My dad used to say it was our family's little moon. Ms. Leighton gave me a nod and stepped back. Your witness. Linda's lawyer stood, tall, imposing, slick. He approached slowly. Ms. Grant, he said, voice syrupy. You claim your stepmother fabricated adoption documents to defraud you. I don't claim it, I said evenly. I proved it. He arched a brow. And yet no DNA test has been submitted, no written statement from your father declaring paternity, just a birthmark. My stomach clenched. He was trying to make it sound flimsy, as if a birthmark were the whole case. I never questioned whether my father was mine, I said quietly. Not until Linda handed me that paper. He raised me. He loved me. He never once said otherwise. He turned toward the judge, his voice louder now. No evidence has been presented tying Ms. Grant genetically to Mr. Grant. Isn't it just as likely? Objection, Ms. Leeton snapped. Speculation. Sustained, the judge said firmly. The lawyer backed off, but not without smirking at me first. He returned to his table. No further questions. I exhaled as I was dismissed from the stand, every muscle in my body trembling with suppressed rage. I told my truth, and now it was on the record. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, then the unthinkable happened. Jenna Linda's daughter stood up from the back row. "Your Honor," she said loudly, "I'd like to speak." The courtroom froze. Linda's head whipped around. "Jenna, sit down." But she didn't. She stepped forward, hands shaking, face pale. "I can't do this anymore," Jenna said. "She's telling the truth." The entire room erupted. The judge banged the gavel. Linda stood, livid. "Jenna, don't you dare." "I found the envelope," Jenna continued, tears now in her voice. "The one with the real will in Kelman's briefcase. You told me to burn it, and I almost did." Linda lunged toward her. "You selfish little bailiff," the judge barked. 2 officers rushed in. Linda was restrained, her shouts echoing through the chamber. "She's lying, she's jealous. That girl was never his, she was always a burden." Jenna sank into a chair, sobbing. I watched it unfold in stunned silence. Jessica leaned in from behind me. "That just sealed it." The judge slammed the gavel again. "Court is adjourned for today. Final ruling to follow after closing arguments tomorrow." Outside, the air felt different, fresher. I stood at the courthouse steps again, watching Linda be led to a waiting patrol car, hands shaking, face contorted with rage. She refused to look at me, but Jenna did. She gave me a nod, and for the first time I nodded back. She hadn't done it for me. She'd done it because she couldn't carry the lie anymore, and in that she'd helped bring it down. The final day was eerily quiet. No outbursts, no smug laughter, no drama from Linda's corner of the courtroom, just silence, heavy and brittle like the pause before glass shatters. She didn't even look at me when I walked in. Her hair was limp, her makeup smudged just enough to hint at a sleepless night. Her attorney sat stiffly beside her, flipping through pages that would do nothing now. Jenna was absent. I didn't blame her. Jessica squeezed my hand as I took my seat. "This is it," she whispered. Ms. Leeton stood. Her closing argument was like a scalpel, clean, precise, cutting through every falsehood that had been laid out before the court. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm and clear, "this case is not about a contested inheritance. It's about the attempted erasure of a daughter's identity, about a deliberate and well-organized lie designed to steal not just property, but personhood." She turned toward Linda, then back to the judge. "Olivia Grant is Charles Grant's daughter in blood, in bond, and in every way that matters. The evidence proves it, the will affirms it, and the actions of the defendant reveal a pattern of fraud and deception that cannot be ignored." She stepped back. Linda's lawyer gave a limp rebuttal. He barely raised his voice. The lie had rotted too far. There was nothing left to hold it up. And then the judge spoke. After reviewing the forensic report, sworn testimony, submitted evidence, and the recovered last will and testament of Charles Grant, every breath in the room hitched. "This court finds the adoption documents to be forgeries, the prior will suppressed through unlawful means, and the defendant, Linda Grant, responsible for conspiracy to commit inheritance fraud." My eyes stung. I gripped the edge of my seat, unsure if I was breathing. "The original will is reinstated," the judge continued, voice steady. "The estate is awarded in full to the rightful heir, Olivia Grant." Gasps, a murmur of voices behind me. I barely heard them, because in that moment my father's voice echoed in my mind. "You'll always be my baby girl." He meant it, and now the world knew it too. The judge concluded, "Furthermore, this court is referring the matter for criminal investigation and charges to be brought against Mrs. Linda Grant and her legal counsel, Mr. Kelman." Linda's face crumbled. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her fingers trembled, clenching and unclenching as if searching for something to hold, something to twist. There was nothing left to twist, no more papers to forge, no more truths to bury, just justice. As the bailiff escorted her away, I stood. She passed within inches of me, and I didn't say anything cruel. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked her in the eye and said one quiet sentence. "You tried to erase me, but I was his daughter all along." She flinched, like the words struck deeper than any sentence the court could give her. I walked out of the courtroom, head high, Jessica at my side. The doors closed behind us with a satisfying click, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was walking through fog or fire. I was just free. I sat in my father's chair, the leather still creaking the same way it used to when I'd climb into it as a child. Only this time, no one was going to tell me to get down. The office was quiet now. Not cold, not sterile, but warm in a way it hadn't been in years. Sunlight spilled in through the tall windows, and the house felt less like a battleground and more like a memory restored. I reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a thick stack of paper, stationery with his initials still embossed in the corner. CGG, his pen, the heavy one he never let anyone else use, rested beside the notepad. I clicked it once, just to hear the sound, and then I started writing. A letter to Jessica, because without her, I might have walked away that day in the church and let Linda's words become gospel. A letter to Mr. Deeks, for proving that truth has a texture, that it can be measured in ink and indentations and forged stamps exposed under a light only a trained eye could see. And one to Detective Brooks, who didn't dismiss me when my story sounded like a plot twist. I wrote slowly, my words careful but unfiltered, because now, finally, I could say them without fear. Halfway through, the house phone rang. It startled me. I still wasn't used to the sound of it. "Ms. Grant," the voice on the other end said. "This is Detective Brooks. I wanted to let you know formally Linda and her lawyer have been indicted. The DA is confident. Trial dates pending." I closed my eyes and let the relief wash through me. "Thank you," I said quietly. Brooks paused. "You did more than just reclaim what was yours. You stopped something bigger. This wasn't her first lie, I guarantee it. But it'll be her last." When I hung up, I didn't cry. I just sat back in my chair, surrounded by old books and dust motes dancing in the afternoon light, and I whispered aloud to the room, "I hope you see this, Dad. I hope you know I kept your name clean." There was no voice that answered. No rustle of curtains or phantom scent of cologne, just a stillness, a peace. And that was enough. I looked around the office, my office now. The walls lined with law books, family portraits that I'd rehung myself. The photo of Grandma Aliner, now restored in a wooden frame, sat proudly next to a copy of the reinstated will. I ran my fingers across the edge of the desk. This wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about presence. About being told I didn't belong and then proving that I always did. My father had chosen me. Blood or not, he'd made his decision. But blood had spoken too, in its own quiet way. Through birthmarks and albums, echoes of a woman I resembled more than I'd ever realized. The lie had been loud, but the truth, it had been patient, waiting beneath the dust, steady and unbreakable. The wind moved gently through the trees that lined the driveway, those tall Georgia oaks my father once called the real pillars of this house. It had been weeks since the final hearing. Weeks since the cameras left the courthouse steps, the whispers faded, and Linda's name disappeared from the headlines. But I hadn't stopped moving. Grief doesn't end with a verdict. It lingers in the small spaces, when the kettle whistles in an empty kitchen, or when a familiar chair sits untouched. That morning, I stood in the entryway of the home I once tiptoed through, suitcase in hand. Only this time I wasn't leaving. I was unpacking. Room by room, I'd peeled back the layers Linda left behind, removed the art she'd picked, the curtains she insisted on, the photos of her children that she'd lined along the staircase like trophies. In their place, I returned what mattered. My father's fishing rod above the fireplace, my grandmother's quilt on the guest bed, the wedding photo of my parents tucked on the mantel behind a tiny ceramic angel. I wasn't trying to erase the past. I was restoring the truth of it. That afternoon, Jessica arrived with lunch and newsprint on her fingers. "You're famous," she said, holding up the Atlanta Herald. I laughed. "Please tell me they picked a good picture." "You look like a force of nature," she grinned. The headline read, "Daughter wins back legacy after inheritance fraud case shocks state." It felt surreal. Even more surreal was the small envelope that arrived an hour later, from the probate office. Inside was a single check, and a letter from the court executor officially transferring ownership of the Grant estate to me, along with the full rights to the trust fund my father had created in my name. Jessica looked at the number on the check and let out a low whistle. "So, what now?" she asked, sitting on the edge of the desk, the way she always did when we studied together in college. "I think," I said slowly, "I'm going to start something." She tilted her head. "Like what?" "I've been thinking about what it felt like being told I didn't belong, that I didn't have a place. There are kids going through worse. Foster children, orphans, people who get tangled in paperwork and never find their way out." Jessica nodded. I stood, walked to the window, and watched the wind move through the trees again. "I want to help them," I said. "I want to make sure no one can bury the truth with a forged piece of paper." She smiled. "You're going to build something good out of this, aren't you?" I smiled back. "I already am." That night, I wrote the first mission statement for what would become the Haven Foundation, a nonprofit to help children and teens fight fraudulent guardianship claims, inheritance theft, and falsified adoption records. I called it Haven in memory of that burned-down orphanage that tried to be erased, but left behind just enough to light the way. Because that's what I'd become now in my own way, a keeper of what's real, a voice for what others tried to silence. And somewhere, I believed my father was watching it unfold with pride, not because of the money or the court win, but because I didn't let them rewrite our story. He hadn't left me behind. They just tried to bury the truth, and I dug it back up. A year later, my house was no longer quiet. Laughter floated from the dining room, soft music played in the background, and the scent of roasted garlic and sweet tea drifted through the air like an old family memory. We'd gathered for something simple, a dinner to mark the 1-year anniversary of the Haven Foundation's launch. But to me, it was something more. It was a full circle. Jessica sat at the head of the table, waving her fork like a wand as she retold a story about our college days. Mr. Deeks, wearing a pressed shirt and the world's driest expression, chuckled softly over his glass of wine. Even Detective Brooks, still crisp and slightly intimidating in civilian clothes, cracked a smile as she accepted second helpings of cornbread. They weren't just dinner guests. They were the pieces of my rescue. On the wall behind us, framed in gold, hung the 2 items I'd refused to keep hidden: my father's original will and the photo of Grandma Alina, her birthmark proudly on display in a black-and-white swimsuit photo from 1961. I caught Jessica glancing at them and smiled. "They're my reminders," I said quietly. "Of what?" she asked. "That truth has a longer shelf life than lies." After dessert, I stood and raised a glass. To old houses made new, to good people who don't flinch when the world turns cruel, and to stories because telling mine saved me, and now we're helping others tell theirs. Glasses clinked, and somewhere in the back of my mind I heard my father's voice again, not in pain or memory this time, but in quiet pride. I didn't just get my name back. I gave it purpose.